Hi, everybody. This is Larry Green with Mercury Leadership. I'm here with Rob Ward today. He's another executive coach, and we're going to talk a little bit today about worry and how worry impacts your life, your health, and all of those things. This is just a thought that came to me today, and I thought, well, let's have a conversation about that and see what happens. Welcome, Rob. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for having me over.
You're welcome. So I've known you for a long time. We've known each other for quite a while. For the most part, I don't think either one of us are worriers, although it seems to flow in and out for me a little bit sometimes. But I think I've always said that worry is a payment for a bill that's not due. That's kind of the way I try to look at worry. What is it to you that you worry about?
It's kind of like what you said. I've learned that worrying isn't worth the time that you put in it. That's a lot easier said than done. And I've spent a lot of time reading a lot of things, doing a lot of exercises to try to figure out how not to worry, basically train myself not to worry, not to let my mind take over and start wandering and talking to myself about things that haven't even happened yet, right?
Sure.
I mean, that's really what we're talking about, worrying about something that may or may not happen.
Right.
So fortunately, as I've gotten older, I worry a lot less than when I was younger. Absolutely.
What changed over the years?
I think part of it is it's cliche, but it's just experience. I saw that the things that I worried about, some of them turned out to not be nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. And some of them didn't happen at all. And I thought, well, that was a huge waste of time that I spent worrying.
Right. Yeah, you can waste a lot of energy being concerned or worrying about something. Plus, if you're taking action instead of just kind of wringing your hands about it, it seems to be a much bigger payoff. That's kind of where I came into it as well. Is I guess with age, I kind of figured out over time that it just doesn't pay to worry. One thing that was a kind of a big aha moment for me a long time ago was to not worry about the things I can't control. And that was kind of a big deal because if you can't control it, what's the point spending energy on something like that? It may seem kind of obvious, but at some point in my life, I was really kind of worrying about that. I think I may have told you a story before. I've had a family member that I worried about a lot, and I had basically made up stories in my head about. It was my brother. Made up stories about how I thought he was in danger or endangering himself in his lifestyle. And once I got past that, and it was much healthier for both of us. Matter of fact, one of my other coaching compadres, when I was kind of processing this at a meeting one time, he said, he's your brother, he's not your job. And that's something that's really stuck with me as well, and kind of a big issue that I used to worry about. And once I unloaded that baggage, the load was much lighter. We'd get along fine. He is just fine, and it's not my job, like the guy said.
I've definitely had that similar situation, what I would call my extended family. And I guess what I mean by that is I have three brothers and three sisters, and I worry about them sometimes, but ultimately they're not my responsibility. So I feel like it's okay if I worry about my wife and my kids. They are my responsibility. So I got to worry a little bit about what they're doing and if they're on the right track. But similar situation, I have a brother you've met before, and we won't mention any names. And I used to worry about, his life and the direction his life was going. And what I realized is he's not worried about where his life and his direction's going. Why am I worried about that? And so I kind of just stopped spinning my wheels on that. And like you said, and then our relationship got better because I think also sometimes when you worry, you start to build up a little resentment towards whatever you're worrying about. And if that's a person, you're going to build up a little resentment for them because you're worried about them, but they're not making you worry. You're the one making that decision.
Right. I totally get that. Like I said before, we make up stories about things and people in life, and that's what I was doing with my brother. And when I used to visit him, he lives out of state. I would always have this crescendo of anger when I was there and just blow up at him, and he would look at me like I was nuts. And I think he was probably right, because nothing was changing. Nothing was what I was making it out to be. Looking back on that, it was a really great lesson to learn, not just for that situation, but for other situations too. And when I get spun up about something, after a while, matter of fact, this happened to me today, and that's why I came up with this topic, was I'm listening to a book that is really helpful. It's called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And they talk about basically separating what's real with what's not real, being objective versus subjective. when something happens, it's objective, it's real, right? It's
Right.
the object, it's it happening. Subject part of it is what we apply to it. If something has happened, there's a car accident, it happened. The fenders are all bent. Then we start to add, well, people, did anybody get hurt, or this is what's going to happen next, and we start adding to that, and that's the subjectivity part of it. Probably not the best example, but it gives a lot of good examples in that book. It's really a great book. It's the second time I'm reading it now, but it just kind of got me off of wringing my hands about some things that are going on in my life and business right now, and kind of kicked me into action and looking at the objectivity of it and going, okay, this is what's real. Now, what action or process can I take, or planning can I take to move whatever the issue is, down the road?
Yeah. Well, and I know you and I have shared this philosophy before about your actions and your thoughts are extremely powerful. So if you worry a lot, basically you're telling the universe to bring you more worry or
Right.
more reason to worry, right?
Yeah.
You also mentioned something just a few minutes ago about action and, don't worry about things that you can't control if you can't take action. I've got an example of, I think a lot of people worry when they have to deliver bad news or worry about what somebody else, thinks about them or what they're going to think about the information that's going to be presented. And a lot of times what happens is that allows that person to procrastinate in delivering that information. And so then they wind up worrying this entire time about the outcome of this, kind of like you were saying. They build up a story in their head. And in the meantime, whatever that decision that has to take place, it has to take place. Like it's an information has to be delivered to somebody. You're worried about that person's reaction. You're worried about that ramification. So you delay it, which is good for nobody. Because my experience is as soon as it's bad information and there's nothing you can do to avoid it, the sooner you get that out there, the better, and deal with whatever the consequences are.
Yes.
Right. And an example of that is, my son Carson, you're learning this for the first time today, but he's decided to quit football.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's been worrying about this for a week. All by himself. Worry about what the coach is going to think. Worry about what we're going to think, right? So he's learned in his young life at 15 he spent this last week worrying about this. Finally brings it to everybody's attention. Everything works out. Of course, everything works out. Yeah. We walk him through the process. I'm like, how long have you been worried about bringing this to us? He's like, about a week. So he's been miserable moping around the house for a week.
Yeah.
All worrying about nothing because he didn't want to deliver bad information.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. I think that's a human condition, is that we build something up, and I think you can apply that to something that you don't want to do. Well, if there's something on, I'm dreading doing that, and you dread it for a week, and then you do it, and you go, oh, geez, I should have done that a week ago instead of worry about it for a week or grind on it for a week or let it keep me awake at night. And it's, it is easier said than done. But yeah, we spend a lot of our existence in that mode. And so anytime I can find a book or read something about it or reread or find something that gets me off of that worry train or that concern train or the spinning my wheels, whatever you want to call it, it's way more productive. And I'm sure that our listeners this will resonate with them as well. And I see the inaction in businesses as well, when people are putting off doing things they know they need to do. With my coaching and peer advisory group clients, I've got one that comes to mind right now. The owner of the company is really a great guy, really good to his employees, and I would say he's good to a fault. It's a 25 or 30-year business, and he's got a couple of 3 employees that are, I call them, they're either A, B, or C players, and you should really be replacing your C players. Well, these guys are a hard B- player, and he's in the middle of an expansion, and he's getting ready to put these B- players in charge of expanding into a new facility. And so I'm starting to talk to him about that, and I don't think he's thought it through, and trying to, as part of the coaching, help him, ask a bunch of questions and find out what the real need is. And along the line, I believe that he'll come to realize that these people are not the right people to drive the expansion. They're going to spend several $1 million for a new facility and put somebody that doesn't currently do a good job in charge of it that needs to do a bigger and better job. So there's an opportunity here for them to be far more efficient, but now they've got these underperforming people that they're going to put in place. And it's all driven by, every time I ask him about it, he goes, well, they've been with me for a long time. And I go, well, I get that. And I said, you're really good to your employees. And so I'm trying to help him work through, well, how do you redeploy somebody? You don't have to fire them. You don't have to cut their legs out from under them necessarily. But I think with the expansion, there might even be an opportunity to put somebody above them that can not only manage the facility to a success, but also train these people. Because I think from my view at the 30,000 foot level, and I've been working with this client for a long time, that's where they lack leadership. It's kind of a middle leadership issue. At the top, they do a great job, but they've got a few of these employees that are just really underperforming. And so I see that often. And, being that I'm the business coach and the guy that's trying to help them optimize their business, the people are most of the time the issues that they're kind of stalled on, if you will. So that's another area of where worry really affects us.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we see it in business clients all the time when they're worried about the ramification of, you call them A, B, and C employees. What about the D employee that the employer keeps on for too long because they're worried about getting rid of them?
Yeah.
And I think where employers really miss the mark when they worry about the D player is the A employee is doing so good that sometimes they don't think about the A employee. But what they really should be worried about, because sometimes we should worry, right? What they really should be worried about is, here I am wasting resources on this D employee. What is the A employee thinking of me in this organization as they witness this?
Yeah, exactly. That's an excellent point. I see that all the time. And in fact, I've got another client we both know that, again, will go unnamed. And that's a cultural issue that by the inaction of the leaders, they let the culture slide. And then you lose good players, you lose the A players, or they turn into B players because they end up with this mindset. Well, if D isn't working, why should I? Why should A work? And it's kind of a downward spiral. And and that goes back to the lack of action. And it's, and like you say, sometimes it's the word that's one of the worst, to me, worries the worst tack that a leader can take is worrying about, we're in California, of course, and they're concerned about lawsuits and labor law and all that. And my answer to that is, you're worried about what the D is going to do when you fire him, because you definitely it needs to go. Well, what's the damage he does every day for the 8 hours a day that he's here? I mean, the damage he might do when you fire him it may be a hit, maybe a big hit, maybe a small hit, but he's gone, and he's not, the leech, he's not the, one of my former clients called them onboard terrorists, that you'll be rid of that. And so the A players, I promise you, the A players will look at that and go, finally, okay, now maybe we can get, somebody good, or we can upgrade or whatever. But yeah, that they're kind of in denial with that worry. And yet it's, it happens all the time.
Yeah, well, you bring up an excellent point. Obviously, we live in a very employee-friendly market in California, and an employer can get sued by an exiting employee for just about any reason. But like you said, what are the long-term ramifications of keeping a D employee in place? Morale issues, culture issues, and the person might be costing you more money than if you just write that check. And so one thing you can ask an employer is, if you could write a check today to make that person go away, how big would you write that check?
Yeah.
That might be smaller than keeping that person for a couple of years. And it's an unfortunate situation. It'd be nice if we could just get rid of all the bad employees and not have to pay a price for that. But that's not the business environment in California. So you just got to kind of almost build that into your cost of operations and then write that check and move on.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We're kind of going down a different road here. But when I think about worry and how it applies to other people too, and in these scenarios we're painting, what do the employees worry about? They're humans too, of course. And if the employees are worrying about something, it's because there's been a lack of communication by leadership. And it's not easy to do. I've worked with a lot of companies, and so have you. And you often see the leadership that they just don't have effective communication. And sometimes it's not only ineffective, it can be downright damaging at times. I had a client one time when I was holding a meeting, a coaching meeting with his whole group of middle managers, and he thought he came in and he thought he was going to do a little morale booster, but instead he walked in and goes, if you guys aren't paying attention and this isn't working by the end of this year, somebody's getting fired. Talk about dropping the room on its head. That was pretty much the end of that meeting. And So now not only did you not motivate people, you made them worry even more, So it's kind of a crazy thing. Yeah, I guess that the point there is leadership, which is, a lot what our business is about. You can really help alleviate people's worries just by some communication, and it doesn't have to be anything massive. It can be something very simple because as human beings, we all have the same little worries in our life. And anytime you can, I found anytime you can help people, alleviate some of those worries, it lightens their load. And especially as employees, the more you help them along, the more they'll help you. I've seen my most successful clients is where you just give them a helping hand. You do little things for the employee and they pay you back tenfold. Some short-sighted employers will say, well, we can't afford to do that. And if it's some small thing, I mean, as simple as, why don't we have lunch for the employees once a month? Have a taco truck show up or buy pizza or whatever it is. And we can't afford them. How can you afford not to do that?
Right.
We happen to be in an employment market, which is really there's very much a labor shortage. And so now I'm seeing them finally doing more and more of that. And, any little thing to take any little, if you want to call it worry off of the employee's head, it can be helpful too in driving leadership.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, most employees, when they are worried, they're worried about their job, right?
Right.
Especially if we're talking about hourly employees, people maybe on your factory floor, et cetera. And when they're not having the communication, but they see change, maybe positive change happening at the company. Maybe there's new people coming in and out of the company, new hires, new employees, consultants coming in. Are we being sold? Are we closing down business, right?
Yeah.
And once again, unneeded worry, but that's what's happening at the employee level.
Right.
And if you're not filling that void by properly communicating, then they're going to worry. They're going to fill that in. Just like when you started this podcast about now they've built up this story and that story is not true. It's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But if nobody's there to give them a narrative otherwise, then that's what they're going to spend their time worrying about. And worrying at any level, employee level, owner level, wherever it is, it exhausts our most valuable resource, which is time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's an excellent point. And as a human beings, we all go there to fill the void. It seems like, unfortunately, we go to the negative. If we haven't heard anything about something, we think it's negative. I was supposed to get a call today from somebody and they didn't call. So maybe that means they're not interested or they're not going to buy or I'm not going to get that job interview or whatever it is. And I'm just thinking now, I made up a story like that myself a few days ago. And I was talking to somebody about it and they said, well, why don't you just pick up the phone? I'm going, boy, that's the simplest and most direct way. And because I had sent somebody an email, he didn't get a message back for like a month. And so I was really upset. And I thought, well, he just doesn't care about my input. Well, I already know this guy's overwhelmed by like 2,500 emails a day. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. So I text him and I get a call back in like 10 minutes. And from his assistant, but we scheduled a call today. So like you're absolutely right. We, as human beings, we make up stories that creates worry. And one of the coaching things I use and it's used on me many, many times is if you're going to make up stories, make up good stories, so if we practice that a little bit, we might be a little bit better off. Anyway, that's any other thoughts on worry today? I just thought that was an interesting topic for a few minutes and see where it went.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic. I think it's something everybody needs to explore. I think it's interesting that you said when we start to worry, right, when we're filling that void, we're filling it in with negative, which I think is the definition of worry, right? Worry kind of has a negative connotation. Yeah. I guess if we were filling that void with positive thoughts and energy, we call it daydreaming.
Yeah.
Right? When you're daydreaming about the future, that feels good. When you're worried about the future, that doesn't feel very good.
Yeah. Excellent way to put that. Yeah. So we'll leave you with this. So if you're going to make up stories about anything, just make up good stories. So anyway, I want to thank Rob Wart for being on the podcast with me today and just doing a little bit of back and forth. We'll have more podcasts coming down the road. Check us out at mercuryleadership.net, and there's more of this to come. Thanks for listening.